Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm Ed Jurenka, and we're going to begin our second segment. And my in-studio guest right now, Ms. Laura Lee Connor. You know, it's a temptation to say O'Connor. Laura Lee Connor, Gender Affairs Coordinator. Detective Kendall Bob. He is with the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, and he's with the Family and Juvenile Unit. And Ms. Dion Boland-Ferron. Yes, I got that. She's an attorney at law and a member of the BVI Bar Association. And we're going to be talking about Domestic Violence Act, but I need to talk a little bit about the Gender Affairs Department. Is it a department?
It's a unit or office.
It's a unit. Yeah. It's a unit, yeah. Because I remember a few years back, and I'm not going to take too much time with this because we want to get to this domestic violence. But I remember a few years back we had quite a consternation. It used to be the woman's desk.
Right.
And the men felt like they were left out, and we lobbied successfully to get to take away women's desk and make it gender affairs. What is its mandate now, and how is it doing?
Our mandate is to promote gender equality and equity for both male and female. So in doing that, we have to come up with policies to make sure that everyone is being treated equally in all aspects or sectors of our society. So right now we have a national gender policy that has been completed and is supposed to be sitting before cabinet soon. And then we have a national domestic violence protocol, which is bringing all stakeholders together and ensuring the service delivery of victims of domestic violence. So we have quite a bit of work on our hands in terms of what our mandate is. It's basically to bring about gender equality through programs and policy. Now, the policy that I was previously talking about has 7 areas that have been identified for policy intervention. So we work on that as well. And as you're aware, the Domestic Violence Act was just enacted recently. The program that we've been running since June is these lovely persons have been going from church to church with me, from school to islands. We've been all over trying to educate the public on what this new Domestic Violence Act is about, because it has so many new areas that are included that were not previously included in the Domestic Violence Act 1996. So as a result, the office has a huge mandate in getting these programs and policies off the ground. So that's basically what the Office of Gender Affairs does in a nutshell.
Okay. What is a gender inequality?
Gender inequality is, okay, I can show you some gender inequalities.
Yeah, you have some statistics, because every time I look around, I see women in all the high positions and men somewhere picking up the rear. So so you must be working for men now, because I know that the balance doesn't shift.
We are aware that there are a lot of inequalities. One of them is there's inequality with education, not in the sense that education isn't available to both males and females, but we have an underachievement of our males. And therefore you have what you're talking about, which is the women being placed now in these higher positions. Because even if you go to the college, and it's not just the BVI, but it's a regional international thing where the colleges are filled with women and the young men are just falling the majority. They have some very, very highly educated men, but when it comes to numbers, it seems like the women are outnumbering the young men in going to school.
So those are things that you look at?
That's part of the policy, yeah.
That's the policy, okay. Mr. Detective Bob and Sister Boland-Ferron.
Dion will do.
Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you.
Good. And of course, Detective Bob, you're with the Family and Juvenile Unit.
Yes.
How you fit into the domestic violence scheme? Well, as an officer.
Well, as you said, I'm presently attached to the Family and Juvenile Unit, and this unit within the force primarily investigate matters of domestic violence, child abuse, and other related sexual offenses. And we manage from the aspect of domestic violence, manage all reports that reported to the police on a daily basis. We manage them where officers will respond to reports of domestic violence, and at the end of the investigation, they will write a report as to what action was taken from the initial response, and those reports will be submitted to our department. So the Commissioner of Police will have a hands-on, as to what role the police played in dealing with reports.
In each report?
Yes.
Okay. And Sister Dion, you are a member of the committee. What's your capacity in regarding the Domestic Violence Act?
Well, I have been assisting Ms. Connor and other members of the committee in looking at the the statutory aspects of the whole gender affairs issues. I haven't just been working with regard to the Domestic Violence Act. We have been working on the Domestic Violence Protocol and the other issues and the other projects that she has coming on stream. I actually got there kind of by default. I was asked to sit in on one meeting, and several months later here I am. But in terms of the Domestic Violence Act, we have, as the Bar Association, broken down the act into simple bits and put it in a document called the Frequently Asked Questions, and we have distributed that in many of the places that we have gone so that people can look at it without feeling intimidated, because sometimes legalese intimidates. And so it's been broken down into bits saying who can access relief under the act, what type of relief you can access under the act, what are the sanctions that might be available, what the process is basically from the act of violence to you getting redress in the court. And that is basically what I assist with, kind of helping to break the law down so that the general public can feel comfortable with looking at it themselves and understanding what their rights are.
Okay. We're gonna get to some of those things tonight. So I just wanted to establish what we were going to do. But this is what it looks like. It's Domestic Violence Act FAQs, Frequently Asked Questions. I just learned that. So that's why I sound so smart. And you could pick it up at the Gender Affairs Office in the Mill Mall, yes. And where else?
That's it.
That's it, Gender Affairs Office. And I think everyone should have one, because it helps you to understand what your rights are and what the redress you have and how to access the support that you need if you're in a situation where you are experiencing domestic violence. And how do you know when you're experiencing domestic violence? How do you know when you're experiencing domestic violence, Ms. Connor?
Well, that is something that we have been sensitizing the public on since October, which was Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we focused on healthy relationships, where, as you know, we had Miss Leslie Vernick come in and do some workshops. But we usually ask basic questions like, does your mate control you? Does your mate verbally abuse you? Because there's so many different forms of abuse. So it was important for us to sensitize the public on the various areas of abuse, because people think that it's just physical. Domestic violence is just physical. It's not just physical. There are several different areas to domestic violence. There's economic abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, intimidation.
So if you're a person and you feel that somehow it doesn't have to be an anger, or it doesn't have to be violence, but somehow you have a fear of expressing yourself, for example. Not that is a big deal. Let me give you a good example. You and your husband get going out, and you put on some clothes, and you get dressed, and your husband go like, "Where you going with that?" I mean, he's telling you that you need to change your clothes because he don't like how you look, and you ain't going with him if you look like that.
In a situation like that, I think it depends on the relationship, because if y'all are comfortable, you know, with that, then I don't see a problem with it. But if it's a situation where it's control,
where you feel like there's got to be a feeling that you have lost your ability to
make a choice.
To make a choice.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to, because it seems to me that domestic violence has been broken down now so finely, and there's so many things that we never thought of it as domestic violence. We used to be thinking of physical abuse as domestic violence, but we never used to think of the subtleties and nuances of the spoken word as being abusive. Mm-hmm. And now I think we have to resensitize ourselves to some of those things. So is there a clinical definition for domestic violence?
There are broad definitions used, but the definition that we stick with when we're doing our sensitization is the definition given in the Domestic Violence Act 2011.
Okay. And that is?
Domestic violence means, according to the Act, any controlling or abusive behavior that harms or may harm the health, safety, or well-being of a person or any child, and includes but is not limited to physical abuse or threats of physical abuse, sexual abuse or threats of sexual abuse, emotional, verbal, or psychological abuse, economic abuse, intimidation, harassment, stalking, damage to or destruction of property, entry into the applicant's residence without consent where the parties do not share the same residence. And then it's broken down to economic abuse, giving you a finer outline of what it is. It includes the unreasonable deprivation of economic or financial resources to which an applicant is entitled under the law, or which the applicant requires out of necessity, including household necessities for applicants, mortgage or rent payment in respect of the share residence, or the unreasonable disposal of household effects or other property in which the applicant has an interest. And also included under this act is electronic mail. And this includes any form of electronic communication through internet or other media access.
So if I email you or meet you on a chat line and tell you some, write you some things that are abusive, that's domestic violence?
If you and I are in a relationship, yes.
Okay. See, I didn't know that. Now, what's different about this act? And whoever wants to answer can answer. But there's been some additions and some changes.
Yes.
What is different about this act that wasn't in the previous?
Okay. Some of the things that have changed, one, as Loralee pointed out, we now recognize certain things as falling under the act that formerly were not defined, maybe because at the time when the last act was done, these things were not even a part of our everyday reality, like the electronic communications. Now someone can actually go on, say, Facebook and can say things about you or harass you in a way that involves the entire community and could really cause the kind of emotional distress that we know now sends people to commit suicide and all of that. So now these things fall under the act because now the electronic media is involved and is included. There's also the economic abuse, which was not formally in the act, which is when you withhold something, that withhold financial support or deprive someone of the financial support that is necessary for them to carry on their everyday life. You know, you withdraw, you withhold.
So if your wife don't give you enough money so you can have food in the house.
Yes, if your wife is a breadwinner, because it's an equal opportunity act.
Well, that's why
yes. If your wife is a breadwinner and you need the money to put food in the house and to send the children to school, and she's withholding that and behaving in a manner that controls you and to get you to do what she needs you to do or she wants you to do, that is seen as a form of domestic abuse.
Yes.
There's also what has also changed is the way you can access redress. Formerly, you could only get that in the magistrate's court. This new act allows you to actually access it through the High Court as well, which is an advantage because when the magistrate court closes at 5 in the evening or on a Friday evening, usually if the domestic violence occurs on the weekend and it's an urgent situation that needs to be addressed, there is nowhere to go. You go to the police and they may arrest the person, maybe, but if that isn't done, then there's nothing to do until Monday morning when court opens. With the High Court, you do have a little more flexibility because they are trying to put things in place where you can make a report to the Social Welfare Department. They can contact the Registrar of the High Court who can assist you in accessing a judge to get an interim order, say on the weekend or in the middle of the night, because the social welfare will now help you to prepare your documents. The registrar will now be able to get the documents filed and can fax or email them to the judge, who can give you an interim order based on the facts set out in your affidavit in a quicker time than if you had to wait on the magistrate's court to open in 2 or 3 days' time. So that is one of the most important things I think that has been added, is that you can now access redress through the High Court
and it's expedited. You can get it done faster.
Yes, yes.
Okay, you get it done. You could get it done perhaps almost at any time.
Yes.
And as needed, and you can get it done quickly. Okay, we can take a break, and I want to talk a little about the penalties. Has the penalties been strengthened?
Yeah.
And also, I want to talk about the police protocols in dealing with domestic violence. We're going to come right back with more domestic violence and Spotlight right after these words from our sponsors. Don't go away.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, Tortola Concrete Limited, and CCT Global Communications.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with the Gender Affairs Coordinator, Ms. Laura Lee Connor. I'm here with a member of the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force who is with the Family and Juvenile Unit, and Ms. Dion Boland-Ferron, a member of the Bar Association, and we're talking about the Domestic Violence Act and domestic violence. And we left off talking about the difference in the new act from the old act. I wanted to talk about the penalties. Have the penalties been strengthened, and what are they?
The penalties under the new act are, for the first offense, the first time you disobey an order under the act, is 3 months imprisonment or a fine of $5,000.
That's the first offense?
That's the first, yes.
So that's a mandatory jail sentence?
No, it can be or. It can be a fine of $5,000 or yes.
Okay.
If you re-offend, then it's $10,000 or a year.
Or both.
Okay. So
Okay. And in the unfortunate event you re-offend again, then it's 5 years.
Up to 5 years imprisonment.
Yes. Well, we would hope that it's 5 years if you re-offend 3 times. So you can be sanctioned with imprisonment of up to 5 years if you, for the third time, disobey the court's order.
The penalties are much stricter, much stiffer.
They're much sterner this time around.
So you have a broader definition of domestic violence, and you have stiffer penalties.
Yes.
Okay. Now, protocols, officer,
Bob.
Detective Bob. When someone calls for somebody makes a person who's a victim calls the police department, is there a set procedure, a standard procedure that you go through?
Yes. Even before the act came out, before it was proclaimed, President Commissioner of Police gone ahead and had a protocol policy, which we call domestic violence force policy, where officers will respond to all reports, whether if it's a victim or someone who may have called and make a report. and officers will respond initially, where 2 officers will respond to any reports that the police may have received, and will go in if there's a case where, as the Act spelled out in giving the police more powers, where entry and arrest, where police may respond and no one come to the door and want to open the door. You know, if he or she is of the opinion that there is something serious is happening, you know, the law gives you that officer permission to kick down the door.
Yeah, force entry.
Yes, force of entry.
So hold on a second. So the law is also now giving the police department
more powers,
increased powers.
Yes.
So along with the broadened definition, along with the stiffer penalties,
right,
the police also have
powers of entry,
broader powers as well, increased powers as well. Okay.
Right.
So you have the ability for force entry,
yes,
if under your discretion.
That's right.
Okay.
So by doing so, as I said, you can do so without a warrant, because if you're there and something is happening, you know, you want a quick response. But at the end, that officer would have to write a report to the commissioner as to his actions.
It has to be justified.
He has to be justified. So, you know, all of this is done through our force policy, you know, and there are also where officers from the police department will correspond with those at the control room who will receive the calls, and he will give direction as to what is taking place. Now, there's also has to be a supervisor who's in charge of that officer who initially respond, and that supervisor will then monitor the situation, and if he needs backed up, he can go in and support him so that, you know, the matter can be dealt with fastly, quickly, because the main focus is for the safety of the victim. Now, when that officer returns to the station, he has to fill out a report form as to his action. If there's any arrest or not, he has to fill out that form of his action, and those actions for that form will be sent to our department, our unit, which is the Family and Juvenile Unit, and then we will assess it and do further investigation. If we're not the one to respond, we will do further follow-ups, because, you know, many things can happen where, you know, children may be involved. You know, we have to do further investigations to what is going on in the home. So all of that is in the policy, and the policy also speaks of police officers who are also victims and perpetrators. You know, if a police officer is a perpetrator,
yeah, I get double penalty.
You know, the supervisor is the one who has to deal with that, because if, let's say, an officer who respond to a report where officer is the perpetrator and they're at the same rank, the supervisor has to take control of that report, you know, and treat it the same way as any other perpetrator.
Okay. Now, there's been some reports that the police would go to a residence and would be prejudiced, you know, especially if the victim is a man.
Right.
The police would just ignore the incident, or the police, or sometimes you go to the place of where the violence has occurred, and all of a sudden the husband and wife who are involved in the dispute now lovey-dovey when they see the police. Has the police been given any sort of training or any directive in those types of situations? Whether it's psychological training to be able to discern when a situation is dangerous, even though it appears to be calm, and how is that handled from a procedure perspective?
Well, we have complaints of that in the past, and this is something that we are working towards in terms of officers being partial when they respond to reports of domestic violence. And again, let's go back to the policy. It says that if you recognize who's the predominant aggressor, the one that poses the most threat, you know, whether it's the man or the woman, arrests shall be made in order to protect the victim, the persons who might you recognize to be the victim. So it's not by you going there to listen to the story and pick side. You deal with what is happening in terms of any criminal offense. That's your role as a police officer, to deal with any criminal offense, to go in there, see who is the predominant aggressor, and then make an arrest as quickly as possible.
When the police come to the scene of the domestic violence, and the woman is clearly battered, but she's saying, you know, listen, yeah, we had a little argument, a little fight, but you know, he's all right. Don't arrest him. I don't want to go this far. What do you do then? You just walk away and leave the situation?
No.
What happens?
As I said, if you recognize the predominant aggressor, regardless of what the victim says, you shall make an arrest. It is the duty of the police officer to make arrests.
So you are looking to see the situation for yourself, and you're making that discretionary call.
Yes, regardless of what the victim says, that she may not want, you know, whoever, whether spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband or wife, you don't want that person to be arrested. It is the duty of the police officer to protect that victim. So remove the perpetrator, the one that poses the most threat, away from the victim with an arrest.
Okay. And so there's a whole new set of procedures that have been put in place for police to deal with.
That's right. And that's what the Act speaks of.
It speaks in
relation to our policies.
And does the Act speak to additional law enforcement training?
Well, we have been doing some small in-house training. We need more training, and it's coming on stream, but because we have so many training at the HLSCC College, I know the Commissioner is working with Ms. Connor in getting all officers trained where the Act is concerned, so that the policy must be followed where the Act is concerned. If officers are not compelling with the force policy, they can be disciplinary charged for not applying the policy with the Domestic Violence Act.
Okay. Now, once a person is arrested, or say a victim flees the home, has any provision been made for that person to have refuge someplace until it's safe to return to the home?
Yes, part of our sensitization includes support services for victims, because we don't want to go out there and give people the law without giving them some form of recourse besides the courts. And Family Support Network is usually the agency that would work with police and social development to safeguard the victim until the matter is dealt with. So there is emergency placement for victims.
There's also the fact that the court can actually make an order for the perpetrator to be removed from the house and to grant what's called a protection order to the victim, and an occupation order, so that the victim can remain in the house, the perpetrator can be removed from the household, and even if he is the primary breadwinner, because we find that very often, because this person controls the money, the strings to the money bag, then sometimes the victims are afraid to complain, because how am I going to feed the children, how am I going to pay the rent? The person can be removed, and the court can, under the Act, make an order for him to continue to pay the rent or the mortgage, and to make sure that the family is taken care of in the usual way that he would have, or she would have done financially, while they're outside of the family home, and so the victim can actually get to remain in the usual place of abode under the Act.
So it's no longer the case where the woman necessarily had to flee, and she might just have to find shelter temporarily until the courts sort the matter out.
Yes, and in fact, the Act does say that once the police reasonably suspects that this person has committed an act of domestic violence, the police can take this person away for a 24-hour cooling off period. So we can see what can be done during that period, if necessary as well, to get the person back, the victim back into the household and feeling safe and comfortable.
And taken away for a cooling off period means taken to a cell.
For 20, yes, for at least 24 hours. Yes,
that's what it means. Yes. I was like, the police had a hotel
with some air conditioning now. Yes, so there's that as well.
Okay, so now after after the police comes and get the situation under control, the perpetrator might continue to have feelings of anger and hostility, and when no one else is looking, could sneak back and do bodily harm to the victim. How does the Act speak to that, and how can a victim go through the system quickly to get protection orders? And also, well, should I ask all these questions at once? But let's deal with those for now.
Let's say the person has been charged, the perpetrator has been charged by the police and taken before the court. You know, there are conditions that will be set out by the magistrate in terms of, you know, him staying away from the victim. And if he violates those conditions, bail conditions, you know, he can be arrested again for as you say, going back to the house, sneak into the house and interfere with the victim again. So in that period of time, before you have all the orders put together, you know, those bail conditions can make him come back before the police again if he violates them.
Okay. And is the police going to provide protection for Ms. Attorney Dion? You just said that the victim doesn't necessarily have to leave. The victim can stay in the premises. Well, what sort of protection the victim is going to be given in the premises? Because it seems like going to a shelter or that a place that's unknown would be safer. How does, if the Act is allowing the victim to stay in the premises, what sort of protection under the Act would be given to that person?
Well, the Act doesn't say that you have to stay in the premises. If it is that the person who is the victim will feel safer somewhere else, then by all means it's better to go to somewhere where you have peace of mind. So if the victim feels that the perpetrator is likely to come out on bail and come at them in the family home and they cannot secure it, because the police, regardless of how good a job they do, I don't think they're going to be able to provide 24-hour security for any of the victims. If it is felt that this is a situation where the person is likely to re-offend, one, the court can deny him bail if it's an arrest situation, so he can be denied bail if it's felt that he or she is sufficiently violent as to come out and do serious bodily harm or damage to the other person. Or two, then the family support network facilities may have to be utilized until they feel the situation is sufficiently under control for the victim to return to the household if the victim feels that they must go back. We should also remember that the Act does not just speak to the situation between people who are lovers, spouses, boyfriend and girlfriend, but also to domestic violence that may be done to children as well. So they are also some of the people that we have to look at to make sure that they are protected as well. And the Act actually does provide that if professionals, social workers, doctors, teachers, etc., are aware or feel sufficiently troubled that a child might be a victim of domestic violence, it is their duty, in fact it says they shall report it to a social welfare professional to have the situation investigated, and there can actually be sanctions applied to these people if they think a child is a victim of domestic violence and you turn a blind eye, so to speak, and do nothing about it.
Can a child make a call to the police to social development with a complaint of domestic violence, and it's protected under the Act?
A child is protected. A child can make the call, and in fact an adult, if the child cannot or is unwilling, an adult who is aware of the situation can actually bring the complaint on behalf of the child. And it also covers anyone who lives within a household. It covers a dependent who may be over 18-year-old but may say be mentally challenged, or an elderly parent who may be abused by their offspring. So it's wide. It doesn't just cover people who are in a relationship that might be a sexual relationship. It covers relationships in a domestic situation across the board.
How easy it is for people to get access to restraining orders and sanctions, especially without having a lawyer, because a lot of times you can't afford one.
But, well, to be fair, there are several lawyers. There are lawyers who sometimes do this kind of work pro bono, but there are situations where you might not even be able to find one, say, on a weekend, as we indicated.
Well,
but
you might not even think to go to one. You might not even believe. You might not even know about the pro bono activity, because, and a lot of times, you say there are a lot of lawyers who do this pro bono, but they are few and far between.
And you may not know who they are.
Okay. Well, I need to know.
Yes,
you need to know this.
but
There are a group of lawyers that you can call on to get help if you can't pay. You can't afford a lawyer.
And also, the High Court staff is assisting persons when they come into the courthouse with all the paperwork. So you don't necessarily
have to
need
have
a lawyer.
Okay, so you can go to the High Court staff.
You can go to social welfare and they will direct you who to go to. But the High Court staff are now in the process of assisting you in getting the documents done and getting access to a judge, so your matter could be heard as quickly as possible. So there are mechanisms that have been put in place to assist even if you don't have a legal representative.
Okay, so there's a lot of help.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a sanction and a restraining order?
A restraining order is one of the sanctions that you.
Oh, that's just a category.
Yes, there are different penalties that you can get.
You go to the place, the incident, and there's injury. What does the police do? What's the protocol for managing injury in a domestic violence situation?
Well, as I said before, your main focus is to protect the victim, the persons who you seem to be at risk. And what we normally do is call in the scenes of crime persons and get photographs of the incident, the whole entire area, the victim, and as soon as possible, if you can, take them to the People's Hospital with the medical service to attend, to those victims who may be wounded or something like that. And to manage the scene is another part that plays, as I said, the scene of crime.
I was just going to ask, gathering evidence, protecting evidence, and so on.
Definitely.
So you train in that, obviously.
There may be a knife, a gun, a cutlass, all those things are important, so that because we are thinking about planning now of a case that's supposed to go before the court.
Okay. So do you call an ambulance, or do you take the person to the hospital, or it depends on how serious the situation is?
Well, it depends, and preferably we call the ambulance, because they are the persons who are trained to deal with persons with injuries. So sometimes it's better to call the ambulance. As you said, it depends on the situation. Sometimes people can take persons to the hospital. Depends on the injuries, the nature of the injury.
Okay, we're found at 13 o'clock, and I'm not sure that I got everything in that we wanted to cover. I know we got a lot in, so you could help me out here, and Lara Lee, and add some information.
Yes, I need to add a lot of information, but like you said, we're under the tyranny of the clock. One thing that was mentioned by you was how cases are being dealt with, whether it's by police, the support services for victims. And there is a National Domestic Violence Protocol, which is a document that actually outlines how first responders are to treat the victims, is standardizing the treatment of victims.
Okay.
So these first responders are social services, medical services, law enforcement, and the judiciary, because remember, information is obviously being gathered here for a case, and then that goes on to the DPP, and that document is about to be signed as well, hopefully by the end of this year. But training has already taken place with hospital staff, which again is a team. Officer Bob is part of that team, and we also are looking at training all of the police and social services. So that document ties everyone's service in together, so everyone will know what their responsibility is.
And when you hope to have that completed and on stream, so all of that's going to be a part of the whole domestic violence
Yes.
act and
well, we only started one sector. So we have 3 other sectors to go. So I would say like the middle of 2013 we should be finished, because everyone is very willing to get this off the ground.
So you have the act, and then you're going to have a set of protocols
Yes.
to
tie everything.
To tie everything together. Okay. Anything else? No.
Well, I just want to say that when you look at the new Domestic Violence Act, the police have a significant role to play. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a lot to do with it. So it is our duty, as I said, to make sure that our victims, you know, can come to a safe place where the reports are made and quick response. And that is something we are working as police officers to make quick response to all reports, not just limited to domestic violence, but to all reports, so that persons can be taken to a safe place and the matter should be speedily, you know, dealt with, and person can be arrested and taken before the court.
Okay, because the victims, I think, also want to have confidence in the police when they call them. I think that's been one of the issues.
That's crucial.
That's one of the issues
That's
as
right.
well, that to be able to trust the police to do the right thing and not feel
Whether
like
it's male or female.
Yes.
particularly
Just about to say that, yes.
whether it's male or
Yes.
female. Yes, so that's something that we're glad to hear, that the police is going to be really be more objective and have additional discretionary powers. So that's good as well. So can I say thank you very much for being on Spotlight?
It was
It's
a pleasure to be here.
being here, and thank you for having us.
I'm sorry we couldn't get more time, but we're gonna get together in the future, and just book a little bit in advance so that I could put you in. I don't know, for some reason everybody Spotlight is very busy.
Yes.
So but I'm glad this is great information. I'm glad we're able to do this. Thank you all very much for coming.
You're welcome.
Next week, the Spotlight is going to be on BVI Trade Show. There's a lot happening with the BVI Trade Show this year. The theme is Buy BVI and Save. And this is an attempt to dispel the myth that after you go overseas, you pay transportation, you go in and come in, you pay transportation while you're there, you have lunch, you pay duty and freight on your way back, that somehow you're saving money by going overseas. So the trade show is seeking to dispel that myth. That's why you have that slogan, Buy BVI and Save. So there's going to be a lot of businesses in the trade show that's going to have some great deals, and the businesses in the BVI have become very competitive to make sure that we can keep that money circulated in the territory. So the trade show is coming up on the 7th and 8th of December, and the next Tuesday evening we're going to have Troy Christopher. He is the chairman of the business committee, and he's in charge of putting him and his committee is in charge of putting on the trade show, and we're going to be talking about the BVI trade show and all the activities and events that's going to be taking place, and all the education that's going to be going on, and the deals that you can make there, and the discounts that's going to be given out. So tune in next week to Spotlight right here on JTV Channel 55. Again, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your words of encouragement. Continue to email me at jtv@spotlight@yahoo.com. I want to remind you that Spotlight is also seen rebroadcast on Sunday afternoon at 2:30 in the afternoon. Don't forget that you could also check out all the Spotlights that you've missed, and if you've missed any part of this one, you can go to jtvlive.net and you can see the Spotlight there. I'm Ed Juenko, reminding you that when the Spotlight is on, you see the facts. Peace and blessings.
This program is sponsored by the law firm of J.S. Archibald & Co. and by the trust company J.S. Archibald Trust Services Limited, both of Roadtown, Tortola, BVI.